Ladies and gentlemen, we've all been there, loving someone so deeply, so fiercely that we forget where we begin and where they end. We've poured ourselves out, exhausted every emotional reserve, only to wake up one day and wonder, who am I without them? Somewhere along the way, we lose ourselves. And that, my friends, is what we're going to talk about today, how not to lose yourself in the process of loving someone else. Love is a powerful, messy, breathtaking experience. It can lift us higher than we've ever been, but it can also take us to our darkest places. We can't talk about love without acknowledging vulnerability, because love is about showing up. And when you show up, you risk being hurt. But love isn't supposed to hurt in the way that many of us let it. You see, when we think of love, we think of connection, sacrifice, and devotion. But we don't often talk about boundaries. We don't talk about the ways we trade pieces of ourselves in the name of love, thinking that if we give enough, we'll be enough. We'll be worthy. That's the myth. The myth that loving someone else should come at the cost of ourselves. That if we just try a little harder, sacrifice a little more, everything will work out. But here's the truth: love should never cost you your identity, your self-worth, or your happiness. Love is not about disappearing into someone else. It's about being seen for who you truly are. Let's start with the myth that love is about self-sacrifice. It's a story we've been told for centuries. From fairy tales to modern-day romances, the message is clear: if you love someone, you should be willing to do anything for them. And while love does require generosity and compromise, there's a dangerous line we cross when we start to believe that love means sacrificing ourselves entirely. We tell ourselves, if I love them enough, they'll change, or if I give a little more, they'll see how much they mean to me. We think that if we just keep giving, they'll finally give back. But that's not love, that's a transaction, and transactions are not sustainable foundations for real, meaningful connection. Love is not a currency to be exchanged for validation or acceptance. You cannot earn someone's love by erasing parts of yourself. The more we give from a place of desperation, the more we lose sight of who we are. And when we lose sight of ourselves, we lose our power. Think about it like this. Imagine you have a bucket. And this bucket represents your emotional energy, your sense of self. Every time you give without receiving, you're emptying that bucket. When your bucket is empty, what do you have left to give? Nothing. But what happens when we're conditioned to believe that love is about constantly giving, even when our bucket is bone dry? Boundaries are the key to loving someone else without losing yourself. But let's be honest, boundaries are hard. They're uncomfortable because they require us to have difficult conversations. They require us to say, this is where I end and this is where you begin. And for many of us, especially those of us who were raised to believe that love means putting others first, setting boundaries can feel like we're being selfish. But boundaries are not walls. They're not meant to keep people out. They're meant to protect what's sacred within you. Think of boundaries as a fence with a gate. You control who comes in and who goes out, and you do so in a way that honors both your needs and theirs. In relationships, we often fear that setting boundaries will push people away, that they'll see us as too demanding or difficult. But the truth is, boundaries are a form of respect for yourself and for the other person. When you set a boundary, you're saying, I respect myself enough to protect my well-being, and I respect you enough to be honest about what I need. And here's the thing about love: the people who truly care about you will honor your boundaries. They won't see them as a threat, but as a guide for how to love you better. The ones who push against your boundaries, who try to guilt or shame you into erasing them, are not people who are loving you. They're people who are using you to fill their own voids. So how do we love deeply without losing ourselves? It starts with knowing that you are whole as you are. That you don't need someone else to complete you, to validate your worth, or to make you feel enough. When you come from a place of wholeness, you can love freely without the fear of losing yourself. Loving from a place of wholeness means that you give because you want to, not because you feel obligated. It means that you love without expecting someone else to fill the gaps in your self-esteem or your sense of purpose. It means that you show up fully as yourself with all your imperfections, and you allow the other person to do the same. When two whole people come together in love, it's not about completing each other, it's about complementing each other. It's about two individuals walking side by side, each on their own path, but choosing to walk together. Now, I know this is easier said than done. Many of us grew up believing that love is something we earn, something we chase. We've been told that we need to be perfect to be worthy of love. But that's a lie. You are worthy of love as you are right now. You don't need to fix yourself or shrink yourself to be loved. You just need to be brave enough to show up as you are and trust that the right people will see you, accept you, and love you for it. At the heart of loving someone without losing yourself is vulnerability. And vulnerability is hard. It's scary. It's risky. But it's also the only way to experience real love. Vulnerability means showing up without guarantees. It means saying, this is who I am, and I hope you can accept me for it. But if you can't, I'll still be okay. Loving from a place of vulnerability means letting go of control. It means releasing the need to manage other people's emotions, to fix their problems, or to make them happy at the expense of your own well-being. It means trusting that you are enough, even if the other person doesn't see it. And let's be honest, there will be people who don't see it. There will be people who take advantage of your love, who drain your emotional energy, who make you feel like you have to keep proving your worth. But those people are not your people. And the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you can let go of the relationships that are holding you back. One of the hardest lessons we learn in life is that not everyone we love is meant to stay in our lives. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go. And I don't mean this in a cold, detached way. Letting go is not about shutting down or closing off your heart. It's about recognizing when a relationship is no longer serving you, when it's no longer healthy, and having the courage to walk away. We stay in unhealthy relationships because we're afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of the unknown. But here's the thing, staying in a relationship that diminishes you, that makes you feel small or unworthy, is far lonelier than being by yourself. Letting go is not a failure. It's an act of self-love. It's a declaration that you deserve more than a relationship that drains you, diminishes you, or makes you feel less than. It's about choosing yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a way that honors your worth. The most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. If you don't love yourself, if you don't see your own worth, no one else will be able to either. And I'm not talking about a superficial kind of self-love, the kind that's about bubble baths and spa days. I'm talking about the kind of self-love that's gritty and real, the kind that requires you to look at yourself in the mirror, flaws and all, and say, I am enough. When you love yourself, you set the standard for how others will treat you. You stop accepting breadcrumbs when you deserve a feast. You stop chasing after people who don't see your worth. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. Loving yourself means taking care of yourself, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. It means setting boundaries, saying no when you need to, and not feeling guilty about it. It means being kind to yourself, especially when you make mistakes. And let's be clear, self-love is not a destination. It's a practice. Some days you'll feel strong and confident, and other days you'll struggle. But that's okay. What matters is that you keep showing up for yourself, that you keep choosing yourself even on the days when it feels hard. Let's talk about fear. Fear is one of the most insidious emotions when it comes to love. Fear of losing someone. Fear of not being enough. Fear of rejection. Fear that if we don't keep giving and giving, they'll leave us. And fear, when it's present in our relationships, often causes us to act in ways that are not true to who we are. Fear tells us, don't set that boundary, you'll scare them away. Fear tells us, keep giving, even when you have nothing left to give. Because if you stop, they'll find someone else. Fear whispers in our ear, you're not enough. And the only way to be loved is to try harder, to be more. But here's what we have to remember: fear is a liar. Fear is not rooted in truth. It's rooted in our insecurities, our past wounds, and the stories we've told ourselves about love. And when we let fear drive our actions in relationships, we end up losing ourselves in the process. How many times have you stayed silent when you should have spoken up because you were afraid of upsetting the other person? How many times have you bent over backward to please someone, even when it meant compromising your own values or needs? How many times have you ignored red flags because you were afraid of being alone? We all do it. We all let fear guide our behavior and relationships at some point. But if we want to love without losing ourselves, we have to learn to recognize when fear is taking the wheel. And we have to be brave enough to choose love over fear. What does it mean to choose love over fear? It means trusting that you are enough, even if the other person doesn't validate it. It means having the courage to set boundaries, even when it feels uncomfortable. It means showing up authentically, even when there's no guarantee of how the other person will respond. Choosing love over fear is not about being fearless. It's about feeling the fear and showing up anyway. It's about recognizing that love, real love, cannot be based on fear. Love that is driven by fear is not love, it's attachment, it's dependency, it's control. Think about the last time you acted out of fear in a relationship. Maybe you clung too tightly, or maybe you withdrew emotionally because you were afraid of getting hurt. Maybe you tried to fix the other person, thinking that if you could just make everything perfect, you wouldn't lose them. But did any of those actions bring you closer to the other person? Did they create deeper connection and intimacy, or did they push you further apart? When we act out of fear, we create distance, not closeness. We may think we're protecting ourselves, but what we're really doing is building walls. And those walls, while they may keep out pain, also keep out love. One of the most difficult things about love is allowing ourselves to be truly seen. And I'm not just talking about the parts of ourselves that we're proud of, the parts that are easy to love. I'm talking about the messy, imperfect, vulnerable parts of ourselves that we often try to hide. The parts that we're afraid will make us unlovable. We all have those parts. Maybe it's our insecurities about our bodies, or our fear that we're not smart enough or successful enough. Maybe it's the parts of our past that we're ashamed of. Or the parts of our personality that we've been told are too much or not enough. Whatever it is, we all have those parts of ourselves that we fear will make someone turn away. But here's the thing: true love, the kind of love that doesn't cause you to lose yourself, requires vulnerability. It requires you to show up fully as you are and to trust that you are enough. It requires you to believe that the right person will see all of your messy, imperfect parts and love you not despite them, but because of them. When you hide parts of yourself in a relationship, you're not just protecting yourself from potential rejection, you're also denying yourself the chance to be truly loved. Because how can someone love the real you if you never let them see it? The truth is, the people who are meant to love you will love you for who you are, not for who you pretend to be. They will love you with all your flaws and imperfections because they see those things as part of what makes you unique, what makes you human. But let's not sugarcoat it, love can hurt. Even when we're doing everything right, even when we're showing up authentically, setting boundaries, and loving from a place of wholeness, love can still hurt. Because love, by its very nature, involves risk. There's always a chance that we'll be rejected, that the other person won't love us back in the way we want them to. There's always a chance that we'll experience loss, that the relationship won't last forever. And that's scary. But the alternative, never allowing yourself to love for fear of getting hurt, is far worse. So how do we build resilience in the face of emotional pain? How do we keep ourselves from shutting down, from closing off our hearts when love doesn't go the way we want it to? The first step is to recognize that pain is a part of life. It's a part of love. There is no such thing as a life without pain. And there is no such thing as love without risk. But pain doesn't have to break us. It doesn't have to define us. When we experience emotional pain, our instinct is often to protect ourselves, to shut down, to stop feeling. But when we do that, we also shut ourselves off from joy, from connection, from love. The key to resilience is not avoiding pain, it's learning to sit with it, to feel it, and to trust that we can survive it. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is a teacher. It shows us where we still have work to do, where we need to heal, where we need to grow. And when we allow ourselves to feel that pain, instead of running from it or numbing it, we become stronger. We become more compassionate, more empathetic, and more capable of loving deeply without losing ourselves. One of the most important tools for building resilience in the face of emotional pain is self-compassion. Self-compassion is the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a close friend who is going through a difficult time. When we experience pain in relationships, our first instinct is often to blame ourselves. We think, if only I had been better or smarter or more lovable, this wouldn't have happened. We beat ourselves up for not being perfect, for not being enough. But that kind of self-criticism only adds to the pain. It doesn't help us heal. It keeps us stuck in a cycle of shame and self-doubt. Self-compassion, on the other hand, allows us to acknowledge our pain without judgment. It allows us to say, this is hard, and it's okay that it's hard. I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough. Self-compassion doesn't mean letting ourselves off the hook for our mistakes, but it does mean recognizing that we are human, and that being human means being imperfect. When we practice self-compassion, we build the resilience we need to navigate the ups and downs of love without losing ourselves. We learn to soothe our own wounds, to comfort ourselves in times of pain, and to trust that we can survive whatever comes our way. At the heart of loving without losing yourself is authenticity. Authenticity is about showing up as your true self, without masks, without pretense, without trying to be someone you're not. It's about being honest with yourself and with the other person, even when it's hard. Authenticity is scary because it requires vulnerability. It requires you to let go of the need for approval, the need to be liked, and the need to be liked, and the need to be perfect. It requires you to trust that you are enough, just as you are, and that the right people will love you for it. When we're not authentic in relationships, we lose ourselves. We start to mold ourselves into what we think the other person wants us to be. We hide parts of ourselves that we think are unlovable. We become chameleons, constantly changing to fit the other person's expectations. And in the process, we lose sight of who we really are. But here's the truth: you cannot have real love without authenticity. Because real love is not about perfection, it's about connection. It's about two imperfect people showing up fully as themselves and saying, I see you, I accept you, I love you. When you're authentic in love, you give the other person permission to be authentic as well. You create a space where both of you can show up as you are, without fear of judgment or rejection. And in that space, real intimacy can grow. Loving without losing yourself in practice. So how do we put all of this into practice? How do we love deeply without losing ourselves in the process? First, we start by cultivating a strong sense of self-worth. We remind ourselves every day that we are enough, just as we are, and that we don't need to change or fix ourselves to be loved. Second, we practice setting boundaries. We learn to say no when we need to. And we trust that the right people will respect those boundaries. We stop overextending ourselves in the name of love. And we start honoring our own needs and limits. Third, we choose love over fear. We stop letting fear dictate our actions in relationships, and we start trusting that we are worthy of love, even if it doesn't come in the way we expect. Fourth, we build resilience in the face of emotional pain. We stop running from our pain, and we start sitting with it, learning from it, and growing through it. We practice self-compassion, and we remind ourselves that we are strong enough to survive whatever comes our way. We show up authentically in our relationships. We stop hiding parts of ourselves, and we start showing up fully as we are. We trust that the right people will love us for who we are, not for who we pretend to be. One of the greatest challenges in relationships is maintaining a sense of independence while still being deeply connected to another person. Many of us struggle with this balance because we've been conditioned to think that love means merging completely with someone else emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically. We often hear phrases like "my better half" or "you complete me." And while these ideas sound romantic, they suggest that we are not whole on our own. The truth is, for love to thrive, both partners must remain individuals. You are not half of a person looking for someone to complete you. You are a whole person, and the healthiest relationships are those where both people come together as two whole individuals, each with their own lives, passions, and sense of self. Maintaining independence in a relationship doesn't mean distancing yourself from the other person or keeping them at arm's length. It means preserving your sense of identity, your personal goals, and your values while being in a relationship. It means recognizing that your happiness and fulfillment are not solely dependent on your partner, but on your own internal sense of purpose and well-being. A healthy relationship is one where both partners encourage each other to pursue their own dreams and goals. It's a partnership built on mutual support and respect, where each person has the freedom to grow individually while still nurturing the connection between them. So how do we maintain our independence while being in a relationship? 1, keep pursuing your passions. One of the easiest ways to lose yourself in a relationship is to stop pursuing your own passions and interests. Maybe at the beginning of the relationship, you were passionate about art, music, writing, or fitness. But over time, you started spending more time with your partner and less time doing the things you love. Slowly, your passions take a back seat, and you start to forget what lights you up from the inside. To maintain your independence, it's essential to keep doing the things that bring you joy and fulfillment, even when you're in a relationship. Your passions are a big part of what makes you who you are, and they should never be sacrificed for the sake of a relationship. When you continue to pursue your passions, you not only maintain your sense of self, but you also bring more energy and excitement into the relationship. Your partner fell in love with you because of who you are, and that includes your interests, hobbies, and passions. By continuing to nurture those parts of yourself, you keep the relationship vibrant and full of life. 2, nurture your friendships. Another key to maintaining independence in a relationship is to keep nurturing your friendships. It's easy to fall into the trap of spending all your time with your partner, especially in the early stages of a relationship when everything feels new and exciting. But over time, this can lead to a loss of connection with your friends, which can leave you feeling isolated if the relationship hits a rough patch. Your friendships are just as important as your romantic relationship, and they deserve to be nurtured. Friends provide support, perspective, and a sense of belonging outside of your romantic relationship. They remind you of who you are outside of the relationship and provide a safe space for you to be yourself. Maintaining strong friendships allows you to have a balanced life where your emotional needs are met by a variety of people, not just your partner. It also takes the pressure off your romantic relationship as you're not relying on one person to fulfill all of your emotional needs. 3, set aside time for yourself. One of the most powerful ways to maintain your independence in a relationship is to set aside time for yourself. Whether it's a few hours a week or a day each month, it's important to have time where you can be alone with your thoughts, reflect on your goals, and reconnect with yourself. This me time is not about distancing yourself from your partner. It's about recharging your energy and maintaining a strong sense of self. When you take time for yourself, you come back to the relationship feeling more grounded, centered, and ready to engage fully with your partner. Setting aside time for yourself also reinforces the idea that you are responsible for your own happiness. It's a reminder that while your partner may bring joy and love into your life, your inner peace and fulfillment come from within. 4, communicate your needs. One of the biggest reasons people lose themselves in relationships is that they stop communicating their needs. They get so caught up in trying to please the other person that they forget to advocate for themselves. Over time, this leads to resentment, frustration, and a sense of disconnect from who they really are. To maintain your independence in a relationship, it's essential to communicate your needs openly and honestly. This includes your need for alone time, your desire to pursue your passions, and your need for personal space. When you communicate your needs, you give your partner the opportunity to support you in maintaining your sense of self. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, and that respect includes honoring each other's individual needs and boundaries. By communicating your needs, you create a foundation of trust and openness that allows both partners to thrive. As much as we might wish otherwise, not all love is healthy love. Sometimes the love we experience can be toxic, draining, and destructive. Toxic love is the kind of love that depletes you, makes you feel small, and leaves you questioning your worth. It's the kind of love that, no matter how much you give, never seems to be enough. It's important to recognize the signs of toxic love because in these relationships, we are most at risk of losing ourselves. Toxic love can take many forms, but it often involves a pattern of emotional manipulation, control, and codependency. Signs of toxic love. You feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells in a toxic relationship. You may find yourself constantly worrying about how the other person will react to your words or actions. You might feel like you have to be perfect all the time, and any misstep could lead to conflict or emotional punishment. You're always giving, and they're always taking. Healthy relationships involve mutual giving and receiving, but in toxic love, one person often ends up doing all the giving while the other person takes. If you feel like you're constantly pouring into the relationship without receiving anything in return, it's a sign that the relationship is imbalanced. They make you feel guilty for having needs in toxic relationships. Your partner may make you feel guilty for setting boundaries or expressing your needs. They might accuse you of being selfish, manipulative, or ungrateful whenever you try to assert your independence or ask for what you need. Your self-esteem has taken a hit. One of the most telling signs of toxic love is a gradual erosion of your self-esteem. If you find yourself feeling less confident, less sure of yourself, or questioning your worth more and more over time, it's likely that the relationship is having a negative impact on your mental and emotional well-being. There's a pattern of emotional manipulation. Toxic love often involves emotional manipulation, where one person uses guilt, shame, or fear to control the other. They might twist your words, make you doubt your own reality, or blame you for their own behavior. Letting go of toxic love is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's also one of the most important. When you're in a toxic relationship, it can feel like you're stuck in a cycle that you can't break free from. You might keep hoping that things will get better, that if you just try a little harder, the other person will change. But the truth is, toxic love rarely changes, and the longer you stay in it, the more you lose yourself. Letting go of toxic love is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of strength. It's a recognition that you deserve more than a relationship that drains you, diminishes you, or makes you feel unworthy. It's an act of self-love, a declaration that you are no longer willing to accept less than you deserve. Letting go of toxic love is also about reclaiming your power. Toxic relationships often leave us feeling powerless, like we have no control over our own lives or emotions. But when you choose to let go, you take back your power. You remind yourself that you are in control of your own happiness, your own worth, and your own life. If toxic love is what we want to avoid, then healthy, sustainable love is what we should strive for. Healthy love is love that nurtures you, supports you, and allows you to be your full, authentic self. It's love that lifts you up rather than tears you down. It's love that challenges you to grow, while also providing a safe space for you to rest and be vulnerable. What does healthy love look like? Mutual respect in a healthy relationship. Both partners respect each other's boundaries, needs, and individuality. There is no pressure to change or mold yourself into someone you're not. Both people are free to be who they are, and they support each other in that freedom. Open communication. Healthy love is built on open, honest communication. Both partners feel safe expressing their thoughts, feelings, and needs without fear of judgment or rejection. There is a mutual willingness to listen and understand each other, even when it's difficult. Emotional support in a healthy relationship. Both partners provide emotional support for each other. They are there for each other in times of need, offering comfort, encouragement, and compassion. But they also know when to give each other space and when to step back and allow the other person to handle things on their own. Equality. Healthy love is a partnership of equals. Both people contribute to the relationship in meaningful ways, and there is no power imbalance. Decisions are made together, and both partners feel valued and heard. Room for growth. Healthy love allows both partners to grow and evolve as individuals. There is no fear that one person's growth will threaten the relationship. Instead, both people encourage each other to pursue their dreams, passions, and personal development. Self-care and independence in a healthy relationship. Both partners prioritize their own self-care and independence. They understand that their happiness and fulfillment come from within, and they don't rely solely on the other person to meet all their emotional needs. There is space for both partners to have their own lives, friendships, and interests outside of the relationship. Building healthy love takes time, effort, and intentionality. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not always easy. But it's worth the work because healthy love is the kind of love that sustains you, nourishes you, and allows you to be your best self. To build healthy love, start by being clear about your values and what you want in a relationship. Don't settle for less than you deserve, and don't compromise on the things that are most important to you. Trust that the right person will share your values and be willing to work with you to build the kind of relationship you both want. Next, practice open and honest communication from the start. Be willing to have difficult conversations and don't be afraid to express your needs and boundaries. Healthy love requires both partners to be vulnerable and open with each other, even when it's uncomfortable. Finally, prioritize your own self-care and independence. Remember that you are responsible for your own happiness, and no relationship can fill the void if you're not taking care of yourself. Make time for the things that bring you joy and fulfillment, and encourage your partner to do the same.